understand that the water scarcity is increasing, and then we all understand the importance of water. So my seminar today is showing that how the agricultural water management interventions can enhance the food security or the ecosystem services. So I will start my presentation. This is the outlines of the presentation, which we will first talk about the present and the future water availability, and then what are the challenges, opportunities we have humanity is facing, and then potential of rainfed area. Further, we will come down to the some of the case studies what we are working, like Kothapalli watershed, and then one of the watershed in the Garkundar watershed in central India, Bundelkhand region, and these two watersheds are of the 500 hectare area of the scale, but the some of, and the one of the another our study area is Osman Sagar catchment area, which is almost of the meso scale of the 75,000 hectare scale. So we have done the some of the hydrology and then ecosystem services impact analysis, and that we are sharing in this presentation, and then we will wrap up with the conclusion. So first let's start with the global water balance, actually, like how much water we have on the earth, on our earth, and what are the different biomes, like the land uses or the users. So if we look at the total precipitation of the earth's surface is nearly per year we are getting 110 kilometer cube. So this is the precipitation on the earth's surface, not on the ocean, like it is on the earth's surface. So like of this 110 of kilometer cube, nearly 35% of the water just goes as a runoff, and then like 72 kilometer cube, 1000 kilometer cube of water is available for the biomes, and then we see that who is using more. So these are the different land uses, actually, or like users, we can say. So forest and the woodland is consuming almost 40, like out of 72 units, like the 40 units is consumed by the forest and woodlands. Grasslands consumes nearly 15 units, and then cropland is 6 to 7 units. So point here is that this only is the water, this one, and the cropland and the grassland water is only is available for the food production and not others one, because if we cut some of the forest area, then there will be further degradation kind of thing, and then we cannot change it, or we cannot alternate it, I would say. So like in broad term, if we talk about the water resources, that there are the two kind of water resources we categorize, actually, broadly. One is the blue water resources and the green water resources. So blue water resources, like the water which is available in rivers, in the groundwater is aquifers, and the reservoirs are considered as the blue water resources. And so human can consume this water, and industries can use this water, and then this water also can be used for the agriculture purpose. Other water resources called as the green water, which is stored as a soil moisture, like the water which is available in the Vadose zone is considered as a green water. So you must be looking at how much of percentage of blue and green water exist. So as I shown you in the first slide, that the 6,700 kilometer cube is available in the cropland, and the 15,001 was available for the grassland. So in the amount of some of the like part of the grazing, part of that water is used for the food production, and then we see that almost 99% of the green water is available in is in form of the green water is in the grazing land, and then 85% of the water which is available in the croplands is in terms of the green water. Only 15% water is the blue water. So whenever we talk about the water management, we always think that we only talk about this blue water, because we say that we have to manage our command area and the groundwater reserves and all other things. But we always forget about our green water, which is there in rainfed system actually. So the focus of our work is how to enhance the water use efficiency or the water productivity of this green water, which is not a small amount. This is a very huge quantity. So we were all talking about the water resources. So here this slide shows that how the food demand is at present, and then what is the anticipated food demand. So it is anticipated that the nearly in 2050 it will be almost double actually. So for example, here in current we are requiring 6,000 million metric ton of the food production, and then it will be nearly 12,000. So therefore, so for producing that much of the food, we also required in same proportion we need the more water actually. But from where it will come? Actually, this is the question. We only have the 6,700 kilometer cube of the fresh water available in croplands. So if our future production also have the same productivity what we have at present, then it will be very difficult. Then so we have to see the solution, and we have to find out the solutions. Option 1. So this is the question we ourselves asking. Can we expand our agricultural land? So this slide shows that this is the expansion in agricultural land, and this is the expansion to the irrigated land. This is the expansion in the crop land, and this is the expansion in the pastoral land. So since 19 onwards, in the 1 century, so we see that the almost like we have harvested, we have captured almost half of the geographical area of the earth actually. If we all together add all the pastoral land and the crop land, all together this area is equivalent to the Asia and then area of the Africa. So we cannot afford it further to expand, going for the further expanding to agricultural land. Option 2, can we harvest more blue water in these areas? So this is the example of the India case, where the bars shows that this is the demand, or like this is the demand in 2001, 2050, and 2025 and 2050. So and then horizontal line shows a maximum ceiling of the blue water, that this is the total potential for India, and this is the 70% threshold. Beyond that we should not go theoretically, because if we go beyond that, then there will be a degradation and there will be a ecosystem losses actually. So that is what, like the 30% we should leave it for maintaining the ecosystem services. And we have already reached this much of our water resources. That means like we are almost close to the threshold. And in future, if we look at this scenario, the intra-sectoral demands is also increasing. Like the demand for the domestic use, for the energy use, for the industrial use is also increasing, and then it will again give a extra pressure to the agriculture. In fact, so this is a very bad situation, I would say, in terms of blue water terms. In another word, actually, if we look at the groundwater use status in India, so you can see here that how we have gone through since 1960 to 2009 to this period. So when in 1960 we had the 1 million bore wells, and then now it is 20 million. So it was 25 kilometer cube of water withdrawal in India from the groundwater aquifers. Now it is nearly 300 kilometer cube. So it is more than 10 times. Now because of that we have however increased our irrigated area. So even our groundwater irrigated area has increased more than the surface water irrigated area. So this is a situation, and further we cannot go further. So option 3 only left is the sustainable intensification, and then watershed based land use planning and increased efficiency of the resources. These are our different resources, and among that the land and water is one of the, these are the few of the important resources. We have to utilize it properly. That is the only way to go forward. So the question comes that whether do we have potential in the rainfed area, or do we have, how can we make the land use like watershed based planning. So ICRISAT has a long experience, and then a lot of research work has been taken place on the watershed issues. Our long-term strategic data says that on an average we can achieve 5.1 ton per hectare crop yields in the rainfed areas compared to the 1.1 ton per hectare in the farmers field. So since 30 years of our experiments data, it is showing from BW1 field, and then we are comparing with the farmers field. So there is a huge untapped potential in rainfed area, and if we harvest even double, this is the 4 times or 5 times than the farmers field. If we harvest it even to double, then a lot of solutions can come up. So similar approach we have like scaled out in 1999 on to the Kothapalli, and then ICRISAT led consortium developed agriculture water interventions in Kothapalli watershed, and this watershed has become a site of learning, not only for farmers, also to the policymakers, development agencies, and also for researchers. In this watershed, a number of agriculture water interventions was taken place. Like, you must be looking that what are these agriculture water management interventions. So agriculture water management interventions are classified in two main categories. One is in situ interventions and ex situ interventions. The interventions what we do into the fields, like for example, like what we make the broadbed and furrow practices, contour cultivation, the practices which increase the infiltration rate, which enhances the green water or soil moisture availability, or which reduces the non-productive evaporation losses, are considered as the in situ interventions. And ex situ interventions, the amount of runoff which comes out from the watershed, if we harvest that amount of water in a structures like small structures, that is called as the ex situ interventions. For example, check dams, farm ponds, percolation pits, and gully control structures. These are the different names. So all these interventions were implemented in Kothapalli watersheds. Some of the interventions, again I'll repeat that: the contour cultivation, broadbed and furrow practices, cultivation across the slope, broader strips, field bunding, and conservation agriculture, no tillage, minimum tillage also comes into this, mulching also comes into in situ interventions. Ex situ interventions actually helps in recharging the groundwater recharge, but the question is how much actually. That is what our work comes here, that because since 1999 onwards, since inception of the project starts, we started monitoring, we started doing lot of hydrological monitoring, biophysical monitoring in Kothapalli watershed. We measured groundwater data set in 62 open wells. We measured the surface runoff, and then biophysical properties, topography. We have mapped it actually by the by total station survey, and then many other soil and chemical properties are we measured. So those data we have used it in the simulation model to answering all these questions, that how the agriculture water management interventions can enhance the or change the hydrology. So for answering those, we have used some of the model, and I would just like to, before that, I would like to say about some of the. This is a schematic diagram of a hydrological components at the watershed scale. So I'd like to show a simple process, that how it happens. Like, this is the rainfall, that is the source of the water, as we know. When it happens, and then first and foremost that some of the portion it goes into the as a infiltration, and then some goes at the surface runoff. This surface runoff accumulates in a streams, and that is called as stream flow. And some of the water which goes as a infiltration, that further partition into two parts. One is the groundwater recharge, and also we can say deep percolation, and one retains in the soil in crop root zone and also in the vadose zone. Then the water which is trapped by the crop root zone is taken back by the is taken back to the atmosphere by the transpiration process and the evaporation process. And the sum of the water through the groundwater recharge again joined to the streams, that is called as the base flow. So this is a simple schematic diagram which is showing the hydrological processes. And in a simple term, if we partition rainfall, so these are the different components, that the surface runoff, groundwater recharge, evapotranspiration, and change in soil moisture. We can say in 4 parts. So so that is what actually, like, we wanted to partition those rainfall into the different hydrological components, and we wanted to understand the hydrology. So for that we had the observations, and then we used the a soil and water assessment tool, a hydrological modeling tool. So this model requires some of the inputs, essential inputs, which is like digital elevation model. That means like topography we have to provide to model, soil information, because we had the good characterization of the area, so we provided that information. Land use information we have to provide. On top of that, we have to provide the meteorological information. That means like all the meteorological parameters on daily scale. And then management information, how do we manage our fields, like like when we are going for the tillage operations, and when we are going for the crop sowing, harvesting, and all kind of things. And then what kind of in situ and ex situ interventions we have made into the watershed that we have to provide to the model. So all this information we provided, and then any model we need a calibration. Unless we do a calibration validation, we cannot use it for simulation. So we have calibrated the model with the surface runoff and the groundwater recharge, crop yields, and sediment yields. These are the 4 parameters we picked it, and then model were calibrated with the 10 years data set. And then these are the different outputs we can get it when the model is set. So these are the results. I like to show some of the results from the Kothapalli watershed. This is the water balance. We got it after our simulations and also with the observations. So you can see that I would say this is the there are 2 numbers, like the positive and the negative side. So positive shows that the source of the water, and the negative shows the different sink components, like so rainfall is the positive side, so that is the source of the water, and the negative means like different hydrological components. So if we pick at the 2000, 2001 and 2002, 2000 was the wet year, 2001 was the normal year, and 2002 was the dry year. You can see that 2000, when it was a good rainfall of the 1000 mm, then it had a 50% amount of water has gone back as a evapotranspiration, like 30% as out to the as a surface runoff, and 20% nearly is the groundwater recharge. But see the next situation, like when it was a normal year, then the 70% was the evapotranspiration. It had the 20% groundwater recharge and the less amount of the outflow, that is the surface runoff. And the third situation was when the dry year. So almost like we can say 90% was converted as a evapotranspiration, and only some of the water left that gone to the groundwater recharge, and there was no outflow from this watershed in this year. So these are the different answers we get it actually, like how the hydrology will be in the dry, normal, and wet years. And on an average, like with the 750 mm of rainfall, the 8% was the outflow, 16% is the overall groundwater recharge, 72% the evapotranspiration within the monsoon period. So if we pick only the outflow, the only one component, like which is like the blue color, this is the gray color. So we pick this only, then this is the rainfall runoff relationship we found it. After that we have generated the 4 scenarios, that the 4 scenarios were the in situ plus check dam, that is the current situation of the Kothapalli watershed, where we have all the interventions. No interventions is a condition of the before the 1999. That means like there was no interventions. And then if we only would have done the in situ interventions, and only if we make the check dam, then how the hydrology will behave. So that gives that relationships we have worked it out, and that shows that then when before 1999 this was the rainfall runoff relationship, and now it is the rainfall runoff relationship with the black line. So you can see that this shift from this red line to the black line. So so that shows like it reduces nearly 30 to 60% of the surface runoff, and that surface runoff goes to the in terms of the groundwater recharge or in terms of the evapotranspiration. Or like further, if we divide it into different components, then on an average the capacity of the check dams in the Kothapalli is nearly 45 meter cube per hectare. So in dry year we are harvesting nearly 55 meter cube per hectare water, and then in wet year we are harvesting 175. So it shows that in the dry years check dams are filling one time, and then wet years it is filling nearly 4 to 5 times. So the other results are different. We have presented results in different ways, and then in situ practices are even harvesting more water than what check dam do. So like a person who is the economist, or maybe further analysis can be made that if we are investing this much of amount or this much of money for this intervention, what kind of the outputs or the harvesting we can make it. So, and then this much is the water which is leaving out from the watershed. And this is the result of in terms of the groundwater recharge. Like there is a nearly the groundwater recharge has increased nearly 50 to 80% because of the interventions, and then impact has gone more in dry years, that which is shown in this figure. You can see like for example for this point there is like nearly 40 mm of recharge for the nearly 500 mm rainfall, and then with the interventions you can see it's 70 mm. So you can see in the dry years even the agriculture water management interventions, it doing really great, and that is what we needed for the building the resilience, or like for against the climatic change or whatever the problems we have. Some of the some more results about the groundwater recharge. We found that the groundwater recharge starts with nearly 400 mm cumulative rainfall in this area. So until unless we reach nearly 300 to 400 mm cumulative rainfall in the monsoon season, recharge process does not start. So that could have some of the implications. For example, if an area which has a 600 mm rainfall, or if which is likely to or climate change likely to reduce maybe 50 mm or 100 mm further, then those areas will be very much vulnerable, and a lot of attention should be taken place. Groundwater availability in a given year is also depends on the previous groundwater stages. Like the groundwater availability of the groundwater recharge is not only dependent on the current years of the recharge, but also like how did we use it in previous years. That also depends, and also like whether it was a dry year or the normal year. For example, like we are comparing the two dry years. One dry year had the wet year before, and the another dry year had a dry year before. So like the situation will be better in this year, and the situation will not be better in this year. And there is a difference between the agriculture water management village and there is no interventions village. There will be a quite high difference. So altogether we can say that this is a situation of the Kothapalli before 1999, and then this is a situation after the watershed interventions, where 750 mm was the rainfall. So 19% of the runoff which earlier had, now it is 8%. 68% evapotranspiration has now 72%. Groundwater recharge 9% has converted as a 16% now, and then some little change in the soil moisture. Not only the water, like the sediment is also an important part, and this is a soil loss relationship with the daily rainfall. And you can see this is a very alarming situation that shows that for example, with 100 mm daily rainfall, like the 10 ton per hectare soil loss is expected in no management conditions, and which is nearly 2 to 3 ton with the management situation. So this is a other impact. Similar kind of study we have done it in a Bundelkhand watershed, where the NRCF, this is a one of the ICR center which works on the agroforestry system. where they have the control watershed where there is no interventions, and this is the watershed of the 850 hectare where the number of the structures and then the in situ and ex situ interventions they have made it, and similar kind of results we have found it from that study as well. So that the groundwater recharge in no intervention condition and the with intervention condition has a quite difference, and the evapotranspiration is increasing with the interventions, and the surface runoff is reducing, and the but base flow is increasing. Like base flow means like a lean flow. When the rainfall happens maybe 5 days before, but still the water is coming in the stream, that is called as a base flow. So that is increasing in interventions villages. This is another this is the Osman Sagar catchment area where this is a Kothapalli watershed. Osman Sagar catchment area is a part of the Musi catchment, and this is the very much upper side, like upper part of the upstream of the catchment area of the Musi. And the area of that catchment is nearly 750 square kilometer, or like 75,000 hectare. And this is the land use where the like 50% area is under the agriculture, and the 42%, out of that 42% is rain fed, and the 8% is irrigated, and the rest of area is in wasteland and non-agriculture use. And the downstream, if you look at that, the inflow to the Osman Sagar is 62 million cubic meter, and this Osman Sagar reservoir is one of the drinking water source of the Hyderabad city, and one of the drinking water source that supplies nearly 8 to 10% of the domestic water to the city. And then if you look at that the inflow outflow pattern, then the Osman Sagar receives 62 million cubic meter water, and then 30 million cubic meter is used as for the drinking water use. 12 million cubic meter is just goes down to the spill over to the Musi river, and then 20 million cubic meter goes as a evaporation losses. So similar work we have done it in Kothapalli. Also we have simulated the hydrology for this Osman Sagar catchment area, and then we found some these results, and we have picked some of the indicators. For example, these are some indicators like the groundwater recharge, potential irrigated area for growing second crop, average yield of monsoon crop, inflow to Osman Sagar, and then total production in monsoon period, spillover release, and soil loss. So these are the different indicators we have picked it, and then we tried to analyze that if we do interventions, if we don't do interventions, then how this trades-off is going on. So if I pick that, if we in the non-intervention condition, there is 73 million cubic meter water is reaching to the Osman Sagar. If we do interventions, then 47 million cubic meters comes. So there is a nearly 30% reduction in the inflow. If we do interventions, then like the 82 million cubic meter groundwater recharge will increase to 98 million cubic meter. So this is a positive side symbol to the smallholder farmers, but this is a negative trade to the city users. Other one actually, but if you see that soil loss, so then 17 ton per hectare is the sedimentation is taking place in the Osman Sagar reservoir. If we do interventions, then it will be 9 ton per hectare. So it's a one way it is negative, and one way it is a positive. So we are not saying that you do or the Osman Sagar has to do this and that, but we are just showing a scenario that that how this such kind of scenario analysis can be used for the policy formation or decision making or for understanding the hydrology and decision making. So I'll just come to the last slide, the conclusion, that global food and the fresh demand is will be doubled in 2050. Rainfed area has the huge untapped potential. Agriculture water management, we consider that a suitable adaptation strategy for building resilience, or like it can address the food security issue. Agriculture water management interventions reduces surface runoff, soil losses, and enhances base flow and groundwater recharges. And as you know that there is a lot of watershed activities has taken place in India, but the impact has not been assessed in a bigger scale. So that is what we believe that there is urgent need to intensify data monitoring at the field and watershed scale to understand the impact of agricultural water management interventions uh, at different rainfall and different ecological regions and with different soil conditions. And then final conclusion is that the agricultural water management interventions is needed for addressing food security in rainfall regions, particularly in developing countries. These are the some of our publications which shows the methodology and results. If someone can refer it further. Thank you for your attention. Anyone has questions? Sir. In situ interventions like farmer himself can do, like the bunding the fields, BBF making and all these things will be the whatever practices we farmer can do in field, in his field, that is called as in situ interventions. But same time he also can promote for ex situ interventions if we also he also construct some of the farm pond, for example, or my community himself or construct the farm pond, that could be used as a supplemental irrigation. So that is called as ex situ interventions, and that is what our watershed department or like we do.
Slide the table is interesting to do some cost benefit of that, like the soil, 1 ton soil, what is the cost additional for the water treatment cost, because the water that has to be treated by the water supply company, there is a cost. They must have published this. It's good to do for the policy maker. There is very good information there. It will show what is the additional benefit.
Yeah.
I think my guess is the benefit will be huge. So that's good to document that. You have the quantity, the tons of the soil. That's possible to do by taking some parameters. They might have data like if there's a 1 ton additional soil, how much additional cost involved for the treatment, because they have to supply the
Sure.
So those are things that go.
The question I have really is, give the examples of in-situ water and ex-situ water savings, right? In ex-situ water, give various options. Were you able to differentiate which options is the better savings? Cultivation, agriculture, renewable village, or various other options? Was anything came out of that study?
A lot of studies on the in our group has been taken place in the previous years, and also our effort is also going on for comparing the conservation agriculture with conservation agriculture kind of thing. Actually, still it is going on, and also like if you look at the literature, previous literature, and then lot of studies has been taken place. Like if we do the conservation agriculture, then how much of the crop yield impact will come, or like how much of the runoff will reduce, or how much of the green water will increase. That kind of work has been taken in previous as well. And then a lot of systems were compared actually, not only conservation agriculture, BBF, without BBF, or with different cropping systems. So if you look at the ICRISAT literature or the previous reports, there are a lot of work has been done.
Just as a follow-up question in that case is, various these options that you have also have impact on greenhouse gas emissions. Has there been any study which is conducted which relates to these other implications?
Right now we have like in our group like for the greenhouse gas emission studies is also going on. Thank you, sir. Sir, sir, actually, the point here is because the rainy season here in this area is because summer comes first and then the rainy season starts. So that the soil is completely dry in the dry shape. So for filling those soil pores, it takes a while actually, and that nearly takes like 300 to 400 water, because we have measured in Kotapalli wells, and we monitored in 62 open wells, and the results are it is not my hypothesis, results based on the data set only. It is first filling to the top soil, and then it will go to the aquifer actually. So what I mean to say, for reaching the aquifer, it may take 300 to 400 water actually.
There may be different seasonal impact, like during the rainy season, different impact. You accumulated 1 year, but in the watershed, this type of modeling. The dry season impact of those used to be different. Even the this is like a distributional impact, either it's a biophysical science or even that has economical implication also. So that may be good to see the distribution. What is the distribution of the different seasonal impact during the monsoon time, normal season from June to up to what is the January, and what happened during February to May with the critical water scarcity period.
In fact, we have done it the long-term simulation, like when we calibrated the model with the 10 years data, and then we run it for the 30 years. So that I believe that is captured already. So and then dry year, what I say, it's the average of the dry years among the dry. This is not the one dry year what I picked. This is the average of the dry years. Like for example, if I have 30 years data set, so 15 may be like the normal year, maybe 7 or 8 may be the dry year, and 7 or 8 may be the wet years. So no, obviously you are right that there may be the distribution. Yeah.
I'm not saying yearly. That's this easy to yearly. What I'm saying is that the complex farming system interaction come intra-seasonal. There's a 8 month is from June to the January is one normal pattern. February to March was the critical time. Water scarcity, one's different sector, water city water supply, farmer different. That may be 4 months separately modeling and the 8 months separate modeling will give you a clear picture. That's more good to the reality.
Right.
One question. In your presentation, ET soil 4% increase before and after this development. So, how much production increased during this before and after this watershed development? And one more point is actually, is it due to increase in area, or is it due to increase in highly water?
There are the two things.